Italy is to send almost 500 troops to the border between Niger and Libya, saying it wants to control human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants. Italy's Prime Minister branded Niger the main transit country in Africa for Europe-bound migrants. Troops will be deployed to Fort Madama on the border between Niger and Libya, an area described as a gateway for refugees who want to cross the Mediterranean. Top European officials have already called for military action. However, the toughest deal's been sealed by Italy's Interior Minister, who's raising eyebrows after boasting about his mafia tactics.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Only when I reassured them that I was from Calabria, a region where deals and alliances are sealed with blood, did they finally agree to sign.
Monitors were shocked by what they witnessed. Thousands of emaciated and traumatized men, women and children piled on top of each other, locked up in hangars with no access to the most basic necessities and stripped of their human dignity.
Italy is to send almost 500 troops to the border between Niger and Libya, saying it wants to control human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants. Italy's Prime Minister branded Niger the main transit country in Africa for Europe-bound migrants. Troops will be deployed to Fort Madama on the border between Niger and Libya, an area described as a gateway for refugees who want to cross the Mediterranean. Top European officials have already called for military action. However, cross live now to Alexander Markovich, spokesperson for the European patriotic group Generation Identity, and Keith Best, former Vice Chair of the European Council on Refugees and Exiles, to discuss this particular issue. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Alexander, if I could start with you. Well, we've heard that, as I said, strong words there from Marco Minniti, but there's no evidence that military solutions work. Don't they usually fail?
It's a very good question. First and for all, I think this is some kind of emergency measure to finally stop the human trafficking to Europe on the one hand, and on the other hand also the influx of terrorists through this route to Europe, which also try to camouflage themselves as refugees. So I think this is an emergency solution, but in the long run we simply have, which is also an opinion of the Sorov Institute in Vienna, we simply have to help governments like the Libyan one, the legitimate Libyan government, to rebuild its sovereignty so that it can control its borders itself, so that we can finally stop this movement of human traffickers one and for all. So what Italy is doing now is an emergency solution, and I think in the long run we have simply to rebuild the sovereignty of these states in the North African region and also in the Middle East to stop these movements. Otherwise, there won't be a solution to the conflict, as you've pointed out.
Well, Keith, I mean, Alexander's saying that is one solution. I mean, every other solution so far does seem to have failed. Is this not a good way, then, or one attempt to stop mass immigration, Keith? What do you think?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, of course, so there's no easy solution, because if there were one, it would have been found already. First of all, can I dispose of this terrorism myth? Mr. Minniti himself is on record as saying there is no link between terrorism and migration, and I share his view on that, and that is the common understood situation. I mean, most terrorism, sadly, is homegrown. It is from within countries where the terrorists come. It's not people who masquerade as asylum seekers and coming into another country. I have very considerable sympathy with Italy, because they've borne the brunt of the migration from North Africa. I mean, 100,000 people this year. Sadly, of course, 2,000 people dying on the way of trying to get to Italy, drowning in the Mediterranean. But of course, some would say that his methods have worked. His deals with Mr. Sarraj from Libya and with the tribal chiefs who came to Rome to see him has meant there's been an 87% reduction in the number of asylum seekers coming to Italy. The sad thing is, and this is where the whole thing falls apart, is this should not be an Italian initiative. This should be a European initiative. This should be a coordinated initiative. And when you get a country like France, for example, negotiating with a different leader from Mr. Sarraj in Libya, then you can see the degree of discontinuity that's going on. This is something that should be tackled in a coordinated way within the European Union, and it's manifestly failed to do so.